Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today's video is all about what can you direct seed in September. Now, you can direct seed a lot of plants. I want to focus on 7 main crops that can be direct seeded. Easiest way to plant, prep the soil, put a hole in the ground, drop in the seed. Also saves you a lot of money. Cheapest way to do it, I think the easiest way to do it. I'm going to cover 7 of them. There are a lot more. I also did a lot of videos on planting your fall garden. What you can plant in August for the fall, what you can even plant in July for the fall. For instance, those are collard greens right back there that went in on July 15th. You still have time to direct seed them, but I want to focus on plants that really like that cool temperature, which is, for those of you that don't know, about 55-degree nights, lower 70-degree days. That's perfect for the cool weather crops. They can take a frost, so all these plants that we're going to put in today germinate quickly with the warmth of late summer, can take a light frost, the leaves can freeze. So these are perfect to get in the ground now. And this is a lot of varieties that will give you a lot of leafy greens, some root crops, and just general deliciousness for your garden. Arugula, lettuce, spinach, mustard greens, Chinese type cabbages, carrots, radishes. I love radishes. I have like 6 varieties. Turnips and beets. Perfect to get into the ground now. Check out the timestamps so you can bounce around and go to the parts of the video that most interest you. I'll be doing a whole series on fall gardening. I'll be talking about transplants this week. I love radishes. You can plant radishes several times throughout the fall, especially here in Maryland Zone 7. So I'm going to plant some today. I'll be planting more in 2 weeks, 2 weeks after that, and they grow really well in the cooler temperatures, especially with the warmth of the day. They germinate really quickly, but they love that cooler temperatures at night. Even the upper 40s is okay, but 50 degrees, mid 50s is perfect for your cool weather crops. Got to clean out this space. What's most important for radishes, and I've learned this over time because I used to not be able to grow them really well, is don't add in any nitrogen that's immediately available to the plant. You don't want excess nitrogen because sometimes it produces more leaves than it does the nice actual radish. You don't need a lot in your soil. I'm going to clear out the space, put down some compost, loosen the soil to about 4 inches, and then just plant the seeds. No water-soluble nitrogen, nothing extra. There's plenty of fertilizer in here from how you set your garden up during the spring and summer. This is the basic setup I'm going to use for all the planting today, so you can just follow this. Now, I did say don't put in any extra fertilizer. Maybe you feel your soil's really depleted. If you don't have compost, compost is perfect. You can always use that because it's a low feed of NP and K that's not going to accelerate leafy growth or anything like that. If you don't have compost, some organic granular sprinkled across the top will be fine. Don't overdo it. It's going to slowly release over the months, so it's not going to overfeed your plants. There's just no need for that. If for some reason your cool weather crops look a little bit yellow after germination or a couple weeks after growing, you can hit them with a water-soluble fertilizer. That will take care of them, but don't overdo it in the beginning. So I weeded out the area, some of my own compost, going to just spread that out over the space, and then going to loosen the soil. About 4 inches deep. I think that's about 10 centimeters. Nothing fancy, just want to loosen it all up. For carrots, because carrots are going to grow 6, 8, maybe 10 inches long, loosen the soil up more. But I'm going to go through, loosen this up. I'll set up the finger holes. The finger hole is basically, there's some plastic in there, just about a 1/4 inch deep, and that's how I do most of my planting. Setup's pretty easy for radishes. Now, I don't measure by, exact number of inches or centimeters. 2 or 3 fingers between the planting holes for radishes, about a hand between the rows. There are 8 holes, about a 1/4 inch deep. You don't have to over worry about that. 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, perfectly fine. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be 40 radishes. 40 radishes at once is a lot to eat, so you do want to plant these in succession. After they germinate, 10 to 14 days later, you can put in more seeds. So I have a couple different varieties in here. In the back, French breakfast, they mature really quickly in as little as 25 days. So that whole space back there is going to be French breakfast. Different globe radishes here. Radishes are going to germinate with the warmth of, late August, early September. They're going to germinate really probably within 5 days. So they're going to germinate quickly, they're going to grow nicely, and they'll be growing into that cooler temperature. They can take a frost. They're going to be ready anywhere between 25 and 40 days depending on the variety that you're doing. So about 1/4 inch deep. Radish seeds are really small. Let's get that in. I put 2 seeds per hole. With this spacing, you can leave 2 radishes in there. They'll just push each other to the side. So 40 radish holes up to 80 radishes depending on what germinate. I never like putting in 1 seed because if it doesn't germinate, you're waiting around for nothing. So I always put in 2 seeds. If you want, you can thin them down to 1 plant. Once they're planted, I just, certainly cover them over, water everything in, stay up on the watering, especially if it gets into the upper 80s or 90s for a day. Can dry out that top 2 inches really quickly. So you really want to keep these watered top several inches for, I think, a good 14 days to make sure they establish, get a deeper root system, can access water. One threat going from late summer into fall is the days can get up into the 90s in some places. Sunny day bakes the soil, can kill off germinated seeds because it just heats up too much, takes away the water, and the plants don't have a root system that's deep enough. So you're watering more summer to fall than you are from late winter, spring into early summer. So just stay up on the watering. But radishes in the ground, I'll do this every 2 weeks. We're going to plant spinach in this space. Couple of things. The 7 varieties, the 7 plants that I decided to pick for direct seeding really do like the cooler temperatures. I planted a lot earlier, like for instance this lettuce went in on 7/18. It can deal with warmer soil temps, warmer temperatures, it's not bolting, and it looks really good. So that was my first wave of lettuce that I put in, and I have plenty of it, different romaines, red lettuces, etc. All went in on July 18th, so this has been growing about 6 weeks. By planting earlier, maybe you can do this next year, earlier in the summer, you're going to get your lettuce earlier to the table in the fall. The lettuce can take a frost, can take a fairly heavy freeze. When the ground starts freezing, that's when you run into trouble with a lot of these cool crops. But they can definitely take a frost. These leaves can freeze solid at night, and then during the day they defrost. They're perfectly fine. For lettuces, I'm not going to seed any more right now. I have plenty. For larger lettuce, about every 6 inches, I'm dropping in 2 seeds. I thin down to 1 plant. Some of these are a little bit beat up because grasshoppers got in here, but they're all coming back. So you get an idea. Let me put my hand down here just so you can see the spacing. This is going to be for full size, and you can see it's growing well over here. This one's actually bolting a little bit. When it starts getting this raised center, it wants to flower. Hopefully the cool weather comes in and slows it down. That's why you can't grow cool weather crops in the summer. Soil's too warm, air's too warm, and instead of growing delicious leafy greens or the root crop that you want, it just goes really quickly from germination to leaves to a flower stalk, and it wants to produce flowers and seeds. So you're really working with the right temperatures. Again, 55-degree nights, perfect. Lower 70-degree days, perfect. So in lettuce, again, every 4 to 6 inches apart, depending on when you want to harvest it, you're going to have wonderful lettuce. You can put that in right now. Spinach doesn't like the heat. If I started spinach in the middle of July, it would have all bolted and flowered. So I put it in towards the end of August, beginning of September. Again, distance of the planting hole, something like that. Every 6 inches is perfect for spinach planting. I'm going to grow this mostly to full size. I harvest a bunch of leaves, as they grow. So I don't give all of my plants, the maximum spacing. Spinach seeds look like that. You want to put, let me put these down. I'll pick them up afterwards. But you're going to drop 2 per hole. So again, you're not waiting around for something to germinate. You can let them both grow. You can pick this really any time that you want. But 2 seeds per hole. Water it in when you're done. That's 10 spinach plants. That's a lot, for a family of 2. I will put more in later. Cool thing about spinach is that it can overwinter here in Maryland. So it will survive through December, January, February, and I'll be able to harvest whatever I leave behind in the spring. So these are really cold tolerant crops. Collards will do that. Kale will do that. We're on a bubble for broccoli and cauliflower, but depending on where you live, you can keep planting. The other cool things about the 7 plants that I'm showing you today is that if we put some plastic over this, That will keep them warm enough for me to keep growing through late November, December, and even into January. So 7 crops I'm showing you now are perfect for fall gardening and for winter gardening. Mustard greens, delicious leafy green, spicy, similar to a radish when you eat the leaves raw. When you cook it down, the intensity of the heat, so to speak, the spiciness of the leaf dies down. They mature really quickly from germination. They can be ready in as little as 25 days, but they're going to mature 25 to 40 days after germination. I space them out a good 12 inches. Planting holes a little bit deeper, maybe ½ an inch deep. The plants get really big, so you don't need a lot of them. Seeds are really small. I like to drop in, let's see if I can do this, 3 or 4 seeds per hole, and then they're going in 3 or 4 per hole, believe me. Maybe more. You get tons of seeds in the seed pack. You'll never get to use them all. But I like to put in 3 or 4 because I'm only doing 3 planting holes, and I will thin them down to the strongest plant as they're growing. You can leave more seeds in there. You can just harvest the leaves when they're smaller. They're a little bit sweeter, less spicy, I think, when they're smaller. And then we're just going to cover them over. That's a lot of mustard greens. These work really well late into the fall, late into the frost. So after these are growing, really from germination, a good 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, I will put in some more mustard greens. I don't want to succession plant as quickly as I do with radishes because I'm just never going to eat it all. Remember, if you plant, for instance, 15 kale plants and you can only eat 3, you're just creating an environment for whiteflies to come in, for insects to come in, for problems to come in. Plant less of the plants, less of the varieties, maybe 3 kale plant. Instead of doing 10 mustard greens, do 3. You can tend these better, manage the pests and diseases better, and sometimes you get a bigger harvest with fewer plants because you can give them the time they need to take care of them. So don't overplant. When you have open space in the fall, it's really easy to plant everything. Just keep in mind, you want to plant these in succession over a several weeks period. Of course, water everything in. The cheapest way, as I was saying, is to use seeds. Seeds can last for years, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, depending on the variety. Just put them in a Ziploc bag, keep them in your refrigerator if you want to keep them cooler and, you know, keep them a little bit longer. But there's no need to buy seed starts for the plants that I'm showing you now. You don't need to buy transplants. In fact, side note, soapbox, you may go to these big box stores and you're going to see a cup of radishes with like 40 radish seeds in there for like $6. Buy a pack of radishes. You get 5 times as many plants, $2, they last forever, and you don't want to be thinning out radishes or beets and then planting them. It doesn't make sense. So direct seed, 7 great plants to do that. One of my favorite leafy greens is arugula. Delicious, kind of nutty, spicy taste depending on the temperatures. Couple ways to plant it, I'll show you that in a second. Arugula doesn't do well during the summer because it bolts really quickly, and the taste just, it gets too kind of bitter, too spicy, like an over ripe radish. If you ever eaten a radish that's been in the warmth for a while in the ground, it's too much of that sort of bitterness taste. The other problem that comes is, if you can see the little green droppings on there, growing from summer into fall, your plants, unlike late winter, spring into summer, are going to be attacked by pests. These are being attacked by some sort of caterpillar. This just reseeded itself. This is an arugula plant. It's going to get huge. It's going to fill in this whole space, and it's going to get like this big in the cool temperatures. So arugula gets really large. I like it that way. I don't mind the leaves that way as long as the temperatures are cool. They taste really good to me. So there's a couple ways you can plant it. So if you want large plants that you'll be harvesting over a long period, you know, you want to space them a good foot apart. There are 2 or 3 seeds per hole. I will thin them down to 1 or 2 plants per hole, and these will just kind of fill in this whole space. 3 plants will fill in this whole space. Back here, much closer together, 2 or 3 seeds per hole. You know, that's 4 fingers. I don't know, maybe 3 inches or something like that, 3 or 4 inches. I will harvest this arugula when it's about this tall. It tastes a little bit better if you don't like the spiciness of the arugula, if you plant it that way. But eventually these plants are going to overtake this. So I'll be cutting this when it's really small, tender, for salads and stuff like that. This will be more used for stews. I will chop it up and use it in salads, scrambled eggs, etc. But I have to keep in mind that as these are growing, I need to pull these out. I don't recommend planting this way. I'm just doing it more for the video to give you options. Like you would want a section just to be these close rows, and then in another section, the spaced out rows. But, you know, I'll be able to manage it. The other thing is if these come up in these holes, I'll just get my shovel, dig under here, take out the whole root ball, and go plant it somewhere else. That's a strategy you can use now. Maybe your garden is filled with summer crops that are starting to die off like mine is. As the summer crops go away, you can take your transplant garden right here, and I have more of that in my fall video series. I'll put that in the video description. It talks about, you know, starting a transplant garden. Maybe you clean this up, you do all your fall transplants in here, the bigger leafy greens, and then you just move them throughout the garden. 2 or 3 seeds per hole, covered over, water everything in. Arugula does really well in the cold temperatures. And again, like these 7 crops, you put some plastic over this, you can grow through the winter here in Maryland. You can grow arugula. These are my purple top turnips. They went in on July 14th. That might be a little bit early, meaning they're getting a lot of soil warmth and heat from the summer, and maybe they're going to bolt. I don't see any flower stalks coming out. What I like to do is plant things at different times from mid-July through August with respect to cool weather crops, the crops that can take a frost. See which ones do well getting some nice growth through the summer, and then stay sort of intact, to put it, you know, simply intact, meaning they're not going to flower or bolt, so that when that cool weather temperature comes, they are ready to just mature and be delicious. I'm spacing these about 4 fingers apart, probably 3 inches. You can see the turnips starting to form after 6 weeks. Hopefully they bulb up nicely, but these really sprout quickly. They can take the frost. I'm going to put some more in another place. I'm not going to show you how to do that because I'm going to explain it now. You're going to just do the same thing we've been doing. This is a beet area that got beat up by grasshoppers. But every 4 inches, 2 seeds, thin down to the strongest plant. Turnips get really big, and you're going to have your turnips growing nicely in your fall garden. You can't eat 20 turnips at once, so again I recommend succession planting. So these are the first ones that went in. If the turnips don't form nicely, you can saute the greens down, you can eat the greens, but after they germinate, again a little bit longer than radishes, every 3 to 4 weeks, put in some more turnip seeds, and you'll have a continuous supply of turnips throughout the fall season, early winter. But again, don't put in like 100 turnips at once, or you're never going to be able to eat them all. It's a lot easier to manage the space with this many turnips. I've been getting white flies. I've been treating them. I don't see that many around now. But white flies are a real pain for your fall garden. They love the brassicas and they love the leafy greens. So don't overplant. You know, plant small amounts, manage them, and keep planting through the fall. I love beets. One of my favorite for the garden. Love to roast them. Spacing is pretty straightforward. About 4 inches in between. You can see that's about 4 fingers. That's how I measure. You know, 4 fingers each way, 4 inches. You want the planting hole to be about 1/2 inch deep. Beets grow really well. These were planted back in the beginning of the summer. They are hanging on. During the summer, a leaf fungus comes in, really damages the leaves. The beets stay intact, and then as it begins to cool down, all these beautiful new leaves come back. These beets are still tasty. The cool thing about the beetroot, unlike radishes that get really woody and fibrous, they stay tender through the summer. So beets are almost a, you know, 3-season crop. Spring, summer, and fall here. You can't really grow in the winter. 3-season crop. The beets from the summer come back. I use the leafy greens. I will eat some of the beets, but I'd like to put more in now. Middle of the summer, early fall is a great time to plant beets. There's 16 holes here. Again, 1/2 inch deep, 4 inches apart. Cool thing about beets is that they're pods. So you want to drop them in 1 to 2 seeds per hole and thin them down. Let me show you what the seeds look like. The cool thing about beets is that they are actually pods. So in each seed, so to speak, each pod, there's multiple seeds. So I only put in 1 pod, maybe 2 per hole. I like to select the ones that are more of a brighter tan color than a darker color. Don't know if that makes a difference, but germination is usually pretty good. You get a lot of beet seeds per pack. So 1 to 2, in quotes, seeds per hole. When they germinate, thin them down to 1 or 2 plants. 2 beets can grow together. Here's an example. They just push each other to the side, and then you can like take one of these when they're a little bit smaller, the other one will get larger. So you don't have to keep just one beet every 4 inches. You can leave 2 in there. It just depends on what size you want to harvest them. About a ½ inch deep, cover them over, water them in, and the beets will germinate somewhere between 7 and 10 days. They take a little bit longer, even with the warmth. You don't have to plant beets in succession, especially here in Maryland. They grow kind of slowly, even though they can mature within 60 days. Sometimes they take a little bit longer. So I like to plant all the beets I want really now. I'll extend this all the way down. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16. About, I don't know, what's that going to be? Like 30 beets right in this space, and I'll put some in some other places. Beets are just delicious. I love them. Really, really good for you. Beets, perfect for the garden. And again, beets, you can eat the greens. So even if you don't get a great harvest of the root, the leaves are delicious. You can use them in salads. I love growing the Chinese cabbages in the fall, also known as Napa cabbage. Matsushima #2 is the variety that I'm growing. I really like this variety. Grows nicely. You want it spaced out 8 to 10 inches apart. The seed pack says every 2 inches and then thin. I would rather just go every 8 to 10 inches, put in 2 or 3 seeds, and then thin down to the strongest seedling after about a week's worth of growth. This is going to germinate really quickly. ½ inch deep, 1/4 inch deep, don't have to over worry about it. One of the cool things to understand about these cool weather crops is this seed doesn't like to germinate when the temperatures are over 80 degrees. So even if we get this in early August, because the soil is warm and that sun baking down on here can really raise the soil temperature easily into the 90 degrees, top 2 inches, 4 inches, even, you know, over 100, 110 degrees right on the top. So the Chinese cabbages aren't going to really germinate well in the high temperatures. So I like planting these late August, early fall. They mature pretty quickly. I forget, let me just look real quick. We're going to go with 55 to 60 days. It matures much more quickly than a lot of the standard cabbages, so that's why I like growing it. And it tastes delicious. So 2 or 3 seeds per hole, 1/4 inch, ½ inch deep, 8 to 10 inches apart. Just cover them over, water them in. This grows again pretty quickly. I'll put in some more towards the end of September. Again, this is another beautiful crop that you can put plastic over it and grow well into the early winter here in Maryland Zone 7. But I recommend the Chinese cabbages, and this is Matsushima, if I'm saying it right, #2. Perfect variety for your fall garden. And finally, carrots. And remember, these are just 7 varieties I recommend to direct seed here in September, Maryland Zone 7. There are lots of other plants that you can direct seed. Again, please check out the video description. I cover what I planted in August. And depending where your zone is, if you're further south, you're not planting right now. If you're up north, you wanted to probably plant a little bit sooner. So the zones are going to affect when you plant. But if you check out the videos, I cover fall gardening really well and the cool weather crops, what you want to get into the ground. I like planting carrots in containers. I sell these at my seed shop. These are root pouches. I believe these are 10 gallons. Let me just double check. Yeah, these are 10 gallons. I sell them in 10s, 20s, and 100s back there. I like the container because this is nice loose soil. The carrot's going to go down nice and deep. It's going to be straight. It's not going to get all twisted through my clay soil out in my garden. I do grow that way. Couple of tips. These are just your standard carrots, 6 inches, 8 inches long. These are half longs. They're going to be 4 to 6 inches, shorter carrots. So if you're planting into clay soil, you can do maybe the half longs. They're the carrots that some of them are even round, but that are shorter, and this way the clay soil doesn't mess them up. You want to plant them about a ½ inch deep. There are 13, 14 holes in here, about 1 inch apart. And I'm dropping in 2 or 3 seeds. Carrots sometimes don't germinate well. They can take up to 10 days. They're going to germinate more quickly with the warmth. I'd rather thin them down, again, than to put 1 seed in and it doesn't germinate. And you get so many carrot seeds in there, you're not going to run out. After germination, they're going to mature in anywhere from 60 to 90 days, depending on the variety. So you want to get all your carrots in now that you want, because they take a longer time to really just mature. In this little space of 2 10-gallon containers is about 28 carrots, or at least there'll be 28 carrots, 2.5 months from now. Cover them over, water them in. Thanks so much for watching. These are the 7 varieties that I recommend to direct seed in your September garden. You can also do this in October. And again, your zones are going to really dictate when you want to plant. But remember, the cool weather crops, You know, as the summer crops start dying off, the cool weather crops enjoy that 55-degree night on average, 70-degree days, perfect for the fall garden. I know that a lot of you get burned out in the summer. I get burned out, but try and get some of the fall crops in because you'll probably get your energy back when things cool down, and I think you'll really enjoy growing the cool weather vegetables in the fall. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com.